If you have ever had a bill from a hospital, you know what it's like. High prices, confusing codes. Together with our corporate sibling, Time Magazine, we're going to shed some light on the secret world of healthcare costs. This week's Time Magazine special report, Bitter Pill, Why Medical Bills Are Killing Us, is based on a 7-month investigation into these costs, and it shows how understanding them is key to fixing our healthcare system. Drew Griffin of CNN's Special Investigations Unit is covering the story on this end.
Bob Weinkauf is finally healthy enough to make the short walk from his front door to his mailbox, but it's a walk he dreads because he knows what's waiting: medical bills. You might think you've heard this story before, but not this one, because the healthcare industry has managed to keep this largely a secret. This story is about what's actually in Bob Weinkauf's bills and how he, and maybe you, are getting completely ripped off.
This full drawer here and this drawer here are just nothing but medical bills.
Last March, a sudden hacking cough put him in a hospital intensive care unit. He was having trouble breathing.
I did, at some point, make some kind of reference to them that I wanted to breathe, and so they put me on a ventilator, and that's where it all started, but I don't remember it.
It was the bill that could eventually bankrupt Bob and Becky Weinkauf.
It's nice out, huh?
Yes, beautiful.
At 60 years old, struggling to keep a small business going, Bob had just switched to a discount insurance company. After just 4 days of treatment, the hospital was telling Becky her husband's insurance would not even come close to covering the costs.
She said, the bill is up to $80,000 already. And she said, Mrs. Weinkauf, I hope you realize that you're responsible for this bill. And I got in the car. My mother-in-law was with me, and I think she was scared to ride with me. I was just hysterical. I thought, what am I going to do? I've worked my whole life. Is this how my life is going to end?
$80,000, it turns out, was only the very beginning.
Altogether, I did total them up, about $400,000.
Well over. In fact, $474,016.60. This is the summary of those charges, broad categories with few details. Becky and Bob Weinkauf decided to ask a few questions and began to see just why health care in America is so expensive. Everything Bob touched, used, or was given came with a whopping charge. Nurses pricked his finger to check his glucose levels 190 times, $39 apiece. The total bill, $7,410 just for that. Asking for that ventilator because he was having trouble breathing, 32 separate billings. Total cost, $65,600. If he had been 5 years older and qualified for Medicare, all of these items would have been a tiny fraction of what he was billed. As it turns out, even asking for a urine bottle cost him extra.
Aren't you surprised they even charge you for that? Isn't there a charge for the room itself?
Oh, yeah. There's a flat rate charge, and I don't know what's included. I guess it's just the room and the bed, and everything else is. Because everything they brought in, whether it be Kleenexes, the urinal bottle, some kind of tubing I needed for the IV or whatever, all of that was an extra charge every time they did it or changed it.
Think that's outrageous? Take a look at this little white cup. You probably last used one of these getting ketchup for French fries. Well, if you've been hospitalized, you probably recognize it too. It's that little white cup the nurse carries on a tray to bring your aspirin. Well, I want you to remember this little white cup because in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little hospital billing secret about these little cups that you will never forget. Does anything surprise you anymore as to what particularly a hospital will bill?
No, absolutely not.
Pat Palmer has made a career battling hospitals over outrageous invoices. She's now battling for the Weinkaufs. She and her 2 daughters run medical billing advocates from her basement outside Roanoke, Virginia. And each time the phone rings, it's most likely a newly discharged hospital patient suffering sticker shock.
They just flabbergasted of the cost that's involved in the treatment that they had. They never dreamed it would be that high.
So where in the world do the hospitals come up with these prices? That, too, is shrouded in mystery. Hospitals determine their own pricing off a master list called the Charge Master. Journalist Stephen Brill, reporting for Time magazine, says the Charge Master is basically a way any hospital can charge any amount for anything.
It's a price list, and nobody can really explain how this price list happened. And more important, nobody wants to try to explain what the costs are behind it because it's totally irrational. It varies from hospital to hospital.
A box of tissues becomes a mucus recovery system. A teddy bear to cuddle, that's billed as a cough suppression device.
Certainly as a patient, you think that's a nice gesture, a great gift, not knowing that you could be charged $128 to $200 for that teddy bear.
Remember the little white cup? It's billed as oral administration fees.
I've had a patient that had $5,000 worth of charges just for the little white cup to hand you your medication 3 or 4 times a day.
How do they get away with it? Mostly they don't. In very stark terms, only the uneducated, unrepresented, or under or uninsured get charged full price. Big insurance companies negotiate discount rates. Medicare goes even further, determining preset prices, maximums a hospital can charge. But for people like Bob and Becky Weinkauf, hospitals can charge whatever they want.
Can they ruin you?
Well, of course they could.
Absolutely. There's no way in the world. If we sold our house and everything we own, it'd made me a quarter of the bill. There's just no way. I mean, it'd kill us, literally.
Drew Griffin, CNN, Atlanta.
And Rick Stengel, the managing editor of Time magazine, is joining us now. This was really amazing journalism that you and Steve Brill have done. What was the most eye-popping revelation that came out at you?
Well, Wolf, on the cover we have a generic acetaminophen tablet, and we say that hospitals often mark that up on your bill by 10,000%. But the one detail in Steve's story that just got me was how hospitals, you know how if you're getting surgery in a place, the surgeon makes an X with a pen. They actually charge $6 or $7 for the ink that was used to make that X where they're going to operate. That was the most eye-popping detail for me.
It's amazing that they can get away with these kinds of things. How is that possible?
Well, it's because the system isn't really being monitored, ultimately. That it's a seller's market on the part of hospitals and healthcare providers, but buyers don't have any opportunity to negotiate. We don't have any knowledge. People generally don't look at their bills. So it's kind of an unregulated process, even though we think it's an industry that is too regulated.
What do you think Washington needs to do to fix this?
Well, one of the things that Steve does in the story, Wolf, as you know, is, Medicare is a kind of hero there because the federal government says Medicare has to monitor costs and can't pay more than a few percentage points more than what it actually costs the hospitals. But even in Obamacare and traditional federal legislation, Medicare can't actually evaluate the cost of drugs, evaluate the efficacy of drugs. Things like that will make a difference and would start to bend the cost curve. So there are different things that Washington can do. And again, it's a non-ideological piece. Both Republicans and Democrats, I think, are at fault in not monitoring this process and allowing the pharmaceutical companies, the health insurance providers, the hospitals to really be too much on their own.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time Time magazine has ever devoted, this entire section to one writer, one story, 20,000 words to a single subject. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. But I felt the story was so important and that Steve did such a fine job and that this can actually change the conversation about a vital subject that I wanted to devote the whole issue to it.
It's an amazing, amazing article, great reporting. Thanks so much for doing it, Rick Stengel of our sister publication, Time magazine.
Thank you, Wolf.
And wait until you see what top hospital administrators are paid millions of dollars, while healthcare costs crippling a lot of American families. Don't miss part 2 of the AC360 Time magazine investigation. That will air tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on CNN.